Okay, so let's talk about something fascinating. What it actually takes to build a brand new company from the inside of an old one. We're going to dive into the world of corporate divestitures, where a massive company literally carves out a piece of itself to create something completely new. So, how hard can it be, right? Well, the answer is way, way more complex than you'd probably think. See, we're not talking about some startup tinkering in a garage. We're talking about untangling decades of deeply woven operations on a massive global scale. The second a company decides to spin off a part of itself, the clock starts ticking. It's a mad dash to day one. That's the moment the new company has to be fully up and running. And, the single most critical first step isn't about marketing or products. It's about creating the new legal entity.
And just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, a single large divestiture can mean forming up to 200 brand new legal entities all across the globe. Yeah, 200. Each one is its own little challenge, with its own rulebook and its own timeline. This is where things get really interesting. You have to think of the entire process like a giant line of dominoes. Everything depends on the step that came right before it, and if just one of those dominoes wobbles, the whole thing can come crashing down.
And that very first domino, it's something called legal entity readiness. You can think of this as the company's official birth certificate. It is the foundational step of legally creating the company, and it's the absolute prerequisite for everything that follows. Things like getting tax IDs, opening bank accounts, even getting the IT systems turned on. Seriously, without this, nothing else can even start. And this process, it follows a super strict, totally unforgiving sequence. First, the legal team has to incorporate the new entity. Only after that can the tax team get the tax IDs. Only after that can the treasury team open bank accounts. And only when all of that is done can the new company's systems finally go live and start doing business. And you know what? These steps are not fast. In some places, just setting up the bank accounts can take a staggering 16 weeks. Now, imagine your entire deal has to close in a year. You can see right away how this puts immense pressure on the timeline from the very beginning. So, that's the basic chain of events. But now we're going to take it global, because this is where the complexity just explodes. No two countries do things the same way, and that's where the real nightmares can begin. This is where a lot of companies really misjudge the time and effort it's all going to take. Something that might take a day or two in the US, like forming a legal entity, can turn into a months-long saga because of all the unique regulations and red tape in other countries. Take China, for example. The process can get completely bogged down by bureaucracy. And it's not just that. Every single application form has to be perfectly translated. That adds a whole other layer of time and, of course, potential for error. One tiny delay here can bring the entire global plan to a grinding halt. Then let's hop over to Europe, where you run into another huge hurdle: works councils. These are basically groups of employee representatives who have a legal say in big company decisions. Well, they have to approve the separation, and that whole consultation process can be incredibly long, potentially putting the entire deal into a holding pattern for months. And then you have some truly unique risks. In Russia, for instance, regulations require you to get consent from 90% of your customers just to move their contracts over to the new company. I mean, think about that for a second. If you can't get that 90% agreement, the deal just stops. It can't close. It's a massive operational lift with truly a make or break stakes. So, with all of these landmines, how does any company actually pull this off? Well, it's not about luck. It all comes down to having a clear, disciplined, and battle-tested playbook. So how do you manage this insane level of complexity? Well, the best practice is built on 3 pillars. You need a focused vision, a comprehensive plan, and then you have to execute that plan with real diligence. So let's break down what each of those actually means in practice. It all kicks off with a crystal clear vision, something like a non-negotiable separation date. This gives the dozens of teams and thousands of people involved a single anchor point, a North Star. It forces everyone to make clear decisions and tough trade-offs when problems, and they will, inevitably pop up. The planning has to be incredibly fast and incredibly thorough. We're talking about a massive, cross-functional effort to map out all the interdependencies, spot the potential roadblocks, and set milestones for every single country. And you have to do all of this within the first few weeks of the project. With so much going on and such a tight timeline, there's a huge risk of just getting paralyzed by all the details. That's why the teams are guided by this one critical principle:
Prioritize speed over elegance. The goal isn't to create a perfect, flawless plan from day one. It's about establishing a solid baseline, fast, that you can then build on and refine as you go. And diligent execution? It really means having total visibility. Teams use a central dashboard, just like this one, to track every single critical milestone across every country. We're talking legal formation, payroll readiness, the whole shebang. Is it red, yellow, or green? There's no ambiguity. Everyone knows exactly where things stand. So who's the one making sure all this actually happens on time? That's the secret sauce, a central, dedicated transaction execution team. Their entire job is to be the nerve center of the operation. The quarterbacks, coordinating between legal, tax, treasury, HR, IT, making sure every single one of those dominoes falls exactly when it's supposed to. So here's the bottom line. Setting up a legal entity, it might sound like boring administrative paperwork, but in a divestiture, it is the most critical, most complex, and most tangled activity in the entire separation. It's the one true critical path to success on day one. So the next time you're facing any kind of complex project, ask yourself this one question. Have you identified the first domino? Because at the end of the day, success isn't about managing every little detail at once. It's about finding that one critical dependency that unlocks the entire chain of events that has to follow.